All right, hello everyone. Welcome to the April meeting of the Portsmouth Conservation Commission. First item on the agenda is the approval of minutes, which we have 3 months to do, January, February, March. Would someone like to make a motion? I think we'll take each one separately, I guess. Oh, and let me start off by saying, because we're only missing one member, Oliver, you'll be voting. So Talia, we won't do a roll call vote for you, but I'm hoping you're online to chime in. Is she there?
Oh, she's not here yet, actually.
Okay, all right. Well, hopefully she'll show up. So do we have a motion for the January minutes?
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes from the January 14th meeting as presented unless any commissioners have corrections.
I'll second.
Any edits?
Notice it doesn't have like the list of attendees.
Oh,
I don't know if that's a big deal, but
but add in that's a good edit, just for note taking. I can add that in.
Yeah, I think I was not there for this one, so.
Yeah, so the reason that January is on here is because when I went back into the February minutes, I realized at the end of the meeting, or the beginning of the meeting, we talked about how we couldn't vote on the January minutes in February because you weren't at the meeting, but you were at the February meeting, and Barbara wasn't at the January meeting, but she was at the February meeting, or there was at least two people.
I wasn't at the January meeting.
But then we only had 2 members who could vote on it, so we were like, let's just postpone it till more people are here. And we forgot to pick it up last month, so yeah. So if we want to add the attendance, then I'll make sure that Alice and Sam are off the list.
Yeah. All right, ready for a motion? Ready for a vote? All in favor? I shouldn't have voted. I just raised my hand. I just said I wasn't there. Sorry. All right, February, move along.
Is that recusal, Alice, or against?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
February,
Oh, I'll make a motion to approve the February 11th, 2026 meeting minutes.
I'll second.
any edits? Okay, everyone in favor? Opposed? Recused?
I wasn't here,
Okay.
Excellent.
or I wasn't there.
All right, March?
I'll make a motion to approve the March 11th, 26 meeting minutes.
Second.
Any edits on that one? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Recused? Great. Okay, moving on to old business, wetland conditional use permit application for 0 Borthwick Avenue. Someone here to speak to that? Whole thing is just frozen. I cannot.
Yes.
I'll try to close it and reopen. See what happens. Go ahead, whenever you're ready.
Damon Burt, Fraggle Rock Environmental. We're representing Liberty Mutual. And we provided a bunch of new information after the comments last meeting that we're here. So I'll go through a little bit of the project narrative. We did update that. The majority of the work is on the stormwater pond area, and the plan is represented on the screen right now. So we're looking to basically clean up the stormwater area and replace the culvert at the outlet, and that is a 24-inch culvert that we're recommending replace. And it's basically failed, and we really can't even find the culvert itself. So that will be a complete reinstallation of a culvert at the outlet of the pond. So we've updated some of our numbers. We have 50 square feet of permanent impact, and that's at the outlet of the pond area. You'll see that in kind of a yellow color. We also, for permanent impacts, the whole, within the 100-foot buffer area, the total square foot is 9,500 square feet proposed. So that's in the darker orange area. In that area, we'll be cleaning the bottom of the pond. A lot of vegetation that's died. There's some trees that have fallen down into the pond based on our recent visit. And we're also dealing with, and we've provided the invasive species plan. So we've provided the invasive species and stormwater maintenance plan. And if folks have got a chance, I can go through some of that, or if folks have questions. I know we talked about some of the details before about the species, but we've identified Phragmites in the pond area, so that's our main concern. So when when the contractor, we don't have a contractor yet, but when we go out to bid, we'll be sure to that they're aware of the invasive species plan and managing under this plan. Any of the sediment, basically, we're considering in the pond as contaminated with the seeds. And, you know, most of the majority of the wetlands nearby have Phragmites also, so it's, we're gonna really want them to truck that as it has Phragmites in it, and then bury off-site at appropriate site. Because really, this property doesn't have an area that we could bury it, you know, 4 or 5 feet. That's available. So that will be the contractor's responsibility and we'll obviously oversee that, that seed source to make sure it doesn't, you know, contaminate somewhere else. So that was our main concern. In the invasive species plan, we'll certainly go through as the work goes along to make sure to identify any other invasive species that are on site. But the main goal would be just to clear and you know, clean up the pond. It's just kind of just sat for many years. So the area in green is, the pond has been maintained to some degree, the vegetation on the parking lot side, but the green area is kind of some trees that have grown up on the slopes. And generally, you don't like to see that on slopes of the pond. So we've kind of gone through that green area and just identified trees. And a fair amount of the trees are sort of in pretty poor condition. Like I said, they're dying, like it's quaking aspen. They're just kind of dropping into the pond. So we want to be preventative and go through. Yeah, I think, yeah, some of those are good photos. That's sort of the outlet area. That's a good, honestly, that pitch, I don't know what photo that was, the one, yeah, that's a good one that shows kind of the trees. That's, I mean, they're not very mature, but they've certainly, you know, are several years old for sure, you know, if not 10 to 15 years, some of them. So we're proposing just to cut a few of those trees out to clear up that area. And that's where the stormwater area kind of narrows down, that photo. But we've come up with a list that we've provided of those trees. I can get I think it's 11 trees that we're proposing to cut as part of this maintenance of the stormwater area. And DES typically recommends removing trees along stormwater areas. So if anybody, the list is right on the bottom there that everyone can see. We got 3 red maples, 2 white pines, and the quaking aspens, which are kind of a successional species that come in adjacent to water bodies and that sort. So those are the ones that just probably don't root very well on a slope and are sort of falling down and dying at this point. So we're proposing those to be removed as part of this project. So that's mainly the majority of it. We did update, like I said, our impact areas. So some of the area is outside the 100-foot. So you'll see it's hard to tell what color the dash line is, but a purple, that's the 100-foot buffer line. Yep, right there. So that other area is outside the 100. But we're still working to get a contractor to do the work. So we'll develop a scope based on, the approvals. But access will be down one of the slopes. We have a couple areas to say how they'll get into the pond. That's the majority of it. We currently, depending on timing and approval, we'd like to do it this summer when it's dry. Certainly probably before they Phragmites seeds out all the way, because it gets pretty dense. So we'd like to be in, relatively before August or something like, even July would be a goal. But we're being April now, we're sort of cutting it a little close as far as maintenance to try to. There's certainly a lot of seeds already in the area, so I don't think a few more seeds is going to make too much of a difference, but we'd like to do it before they all seeded out. We also, from Liberty Mutual, does anybody have any questions? I kind of went through it a little quickly on the invasive species and stormwater management. We have a monitoring form that we'll put in for a yearly review after the restoration. And there's a form we'll just go through and review the stormwater area. We'll certainly look for invasives. If any of the culverts need maintenance, that's included in the report there. And we have a list of inspections and maintenance items. We'll certainly check for trash, sediment, the woody vegetation, invasive species. And we'll propose to maintain any of those items before they sort of get out of control like we're kind of at now. So that would be a yearly monitoring that we perform to check on the stormwater area. Liberty Mutual prepared a snow and ice management plan, and this is kind of their standard protocol on snow and ice. Certainly if there's any questions on this, questions or concerns, we can bring it to Liberty Mutual to address any of the items on that plan. So those are the main items. I know the commission wanted certainly the snow and ice management plan, invasive species, and then we have more of a stormwater management plan. So those are the main items that we think we needed to address from last meeting. So if there's any other, if there's any questions, we'll certainly answer those.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you. Go ahead, Jess.
Just on the monitoring plan, I understand that you will be out there annually to check, but will the applicant do any additional monitoring just to clear debris within that year time frame?
Certainly we could check on that. I think that would make sense.
Yeah.
And certainly we could check with Liberty Mutual on that. I know they have contractors that are responsible. I just, not 100% sure, so we can certainly check on that.
Okay. I think,
or if
like you
that's a
said, that would be a recommendation I would have. It seems smart to kind of get ahead of it before it
Sure.
becomes an issue.
Sure. Yep, understood.
I have a question. With the 11 trees that are being cut, is there any opportunity on the property to plant in kind, or 11 trees of a better, whatever species would be appropriate?
Yeah, it's a good question. I hadn't thought of that, to be honest. So, I mean, I don't want to be mean about the trees, but we kind of consider them a little bit invasive. Not really
Yeah.
invasive, but like,
Yeah.
they weren't really supposed to grow there, so I didn't really think about mitigating
Yeah.
for those. Certainly, I could bring it to Liberty Mutual's attention to, ask if we can replace some trees.
Yeah.
I think, quaking aspen is one of those trees that's a short-lived, kind of not most desirable, but certainly can bring it to Liberty Mutual's attention and I can ask.
Yeah.
I just don't know offhand, but I certainly, if the commission would recommend that, I can certainly bring it to Liberty Mutual's attention and
Okay.
check
I mean,
on it.
In
'cause-
my head, I was also thinking, you've got that huge expanse of pavement, like if there was opportunity to, make some planting areas
Yeah.
in the pavement and put some of the trees in there. That's
Yeah,
just
if it was
what I
my
was
parking
thinking.
lot, I'd say yes, but
Yeah.
I have to just check with Liberty,
Yeah,
but
no, I understand.
I don't see why not.
Yeah.
It seemed to make sense to me, but we'll, if you certainly recommend that,
Yeah.
we can get back to you guys on that for
Okay.
sure. That
Great.
seems a reasonable recommendation
Yeah.
for sure. Because you're right, it is very wide open. It really goes from parking lot to wetland, basically.
And I think there are some electrical lines that go over it, so there might be some,
That's a valid point, yes. So
Yeah,
certainly
so-
in that corridor,
yeah.
whether it's 50 or 100 feet, we'd
I mean, even
certainly,
if it's not trees, like, just any
some
plants
shrubs
would probably
or
be better, but,
some vegetation.
yeah,
right?
I mean, for us, we were thinking about replacing the trees, so, that's kind of where we're going, but I understand if that's a little tricky with
Yes, I
what's
mean,
above. in that whole
100%.
area.
And you can see, obviously, there's a corridor of the electric line. So
Yeah.
I think I'd have to personally check on where the easement is. I don't
Yeah.
know off the top of my head.
Yeah.
But I do see a line that looks like maybe that's the easement for the electrical corridor, sort of between catch basin 6 and 1. It kind of crosses in that area. Yeah, right there. That might be the easement line, but I don't know
Yeah.
personally.
Yep.
But, so I would think that there's, opportunity to do some plantings. And if there is a tree restriction, we could certainly do some shrubs.
Yeah.
I don't see why they would be opposed to that. That doesn't
Yeah.
strike me as anything that would seem relatively minor in my perspective,
Yeah.
but I would have to check with Liberty Mutual, but I don't think
Okay,
would be an issue. Certainly replacing the 11 with something similar or a shrub or tree.
yeah, whatever's appropriate
Yeah,
for,
yeah. And I know, certainly in the maintenance of the parking lot, they would just sort of pick where would make the most sense, just so
right,
you're not,
because nothing's happened out there with regards to the parking lot yet, right?
no.
Okay,
No. There is, right now, you will see they're storing some of the railroad stuff. I don't really know the relationship of that or how that really works, but that was an observation. I don't
Yeah.
know. You'll see there's railroad, timbers out there. I don't know what that relationship is, but the parking lot, in my mind, when I've been out there, doesn't get a lot of use. I think it's sort of looks like an overflow parking lot
Yeah.
at this point. But the future may be something different that I'm unaware of right now.
Yeah.
So, but I think the plantings would make sense, and certainly we'll check on that for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Just reiterate too that, the plantings will also help with the stormwater situation too, right? Because it'll help evaporate off some of
Correct.
that water.
Correct. Yep.
And I guess I was also just curious, like this pond that's there, this detention pond,
Yeah.
is it actually large enough to treat the whole parking lot?
Well-
how are you doing
Yeah,
in general with
I mean,
stormwater management?
that was I'd basically say the original intent, and it's treating is a
Right.
relative thing.
Yeah.
But I think overall, the drainage sort of makes sense. Whether it detains like it was originally designed, I don't know all the details of that, but certainly, without an outlet and all that, right now, it's not performing too well, but yes, it was designed certainly to capture that's why we highlighted all the culverts and what feeds in. That was the original design. It was several years ago, so the standard's certainly a little different, but in the general design, it was set up for that, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I was just curious, like, all this work, right? Do you feel good about the design now, given what you know? And
Well, right
Yeah.
now, you look at the constraints, the way it was set up.
yeah,
Certainly the slopes along the railroad, it's like, there's really not any opportunity to expand because that slope is so steep and it's close to
Yeah.
the property line. Even where we're kind of cutting the trees, I think, we might just have to check with the railroad, to be honest, when we do that, because it's close to the corridor. It's technically on Liberty Mutual's parcel, but close enough to the railway corridor that we might even just have to check in on the tree clearing itself. But the pond itself is pretty much locked in because the slopes are really quite steep. So there isn't a lot of opportunity to change it too much.
right. So it's the best you're going to do, even if it's.
I think so, yeah. It's a great question, and I wish I could say there was more area and we could, do something a little bit different, but I think it will deal with the stormwater, and certainly, restoring it to actually allow it to, potentially do some infiltration at least and hold. It should be a ways away. It's not groundwater in there, so it should have some infiltration. I just don't know right now what it is,
But you're not necessarily restoring like the layers of gravel and whatever that.
no, we're just
Basically-
basically bringing it back to what the original design was.
In terms of the size. And,
Yes.
And hoping that the layers underneath are going to continue functioning.
Yep, and as we're there,
Yeah.
because it's kind of hard to say, I mean, if there are considerations to make it better, we'll probably do that on site just to make sure. Because I think we showed the outlet, really want to enhance that a little bit with riprap to make sure that's more secure so that we don't have any clogging like what was happening before. Because I think the stabilization of the culvert outflow, we're really going to want to make sure that's installed correctly and stable so that there's no failure there and slumpage or anything like that. So I think that should really improve the pond performance.
Cool. Well, thank you.
Sure.
I just had, I just wanted to confirm, because from your photos, it looks like it's great to see those photos.
Yep.
The top of the bank where there are trees up there, it's just in the slope and the,
Just in the slope, yeah, certainly. And I think the better trees, honestly, are on that slope. So if you see like the oaks, like on that top part of the slope, you'll see, if you look at the evergreen, so that's pine. The ones, if we're looking to the left, really won't be cut. It's only a few on the actual slope. So there are, so we won't be on that slope part behind there, no. Maybe that pine right there might be cut, that one. But they're bigger trees are behind, we're not touching at all. And those are really like oaks and more developed, larger, they're almost 2-foot caliper. Those are basically quake and aspen that are on the slope right there we're looking at. It was hard to kind of get a great photo of what it is, but those are definitely into the slope. The better, I call better trees like oak and well established along that corridor, we won't be touching. So.
I just had one other question. Last time, I think you talked about salt storage there.
Yes, yep.
Are you guys,
So on the snow and ice management plan,
yeah, it talks about how to do it.
yeah, and I think there should be a figure that shows where it is. It's that salt storage. So you see that in blue. That is like that canopy area. And that's outside the buffer, even though it's close to the stormwater area. it's outside the 100-foot buffer. And that's what they're currently how they're using it.
Okay, I was just wondering if that's what they were doing now, too.
That is what they're doing, yeah. And so there's actually where the red is, I don't know why you can't see in that building, there's like a storage office building, and it's kind of their management or maintenance sort of headquarters maybe, or something. I'm not sure. But the equipment's in that area. So I think, based on, that's kind of a funny photo, to be honest, to them to use, because it's not, it's kind of a little deceiving, that photo, yeah, or the image they used. But they've kind of put it as far away on that parking lot as they can, relatively, outside the buffer, even though it's close to the stormwater area.
Yeah, they have good BMPs anyway, so.
Yeah, they should be following the BMPs, and they have the record keeping on, the salts, when they did it, all that. We have not been involved in the winter monitoring anything, but that's something they're, following in this plan. So,
Thank you.
yeah, it's a good question.
Any other questions? Are we ready for a motion? Is there anything in the staff memo, Kate, that you need to address? I can't remember.
Yeah, good question. In the staff memo, I think the last time we met, we talked about getting a stamp on there. I
Yep.
think on the hard copy file that you delivered.
Correct.
You had the stamp. If we
Yeah.
could just get a scanned version of that page.
Yes, yep,
Perfect for
yep,
our
we'll do that
files.
for sure, yep,
Okay, thanks.
yeah.
And it seems to be a thing with a lot of people. They'll do the hard copy stamp, but they
I
don't
know,
scan
yeah,
it.
and then the digital, you're like, oh, we'll get to that. And
Then you gotta
yeah.
scan it. It's a pain.
Yeah, exactly, yep, 100%.
Just the one page would be great.
Sure, we'll do that.
And we talked about trees. I think our second stipulation was a rollover from the first time we saw you, which was kind of directly from the Department of Public Works. They wanted to see that maintenance plan and make sure that they're committing to annual and long-term stuff. So I think the first half of that stipulation doesn't really apply anymore because you provided a maintenance plan that looks at annual stuff. I think the second half is what we wanted to make sure gets included with this motion, is that this plan, the maintenance plan, shall be entered into the chain of title for the property in a recorded document approved by the planning and legal departments and recorded at the Rockingham County Registry of Deeds.
Sure.
Yeah. And then we also recommended boundary markers for this site. And we can talk about, if that's appropriate or how that would look, or if anyone's interested in that.
Yeah, that would be wetland boundary, or the 100-foot buffer, or,
So typically, we've been asking people to put them along the 25-foot buffer line, so it wouldn't be right on the wetland boundary, but in some cases, it's more appropriate to put it on that boundary line. But it doesn't denote on the actual sign, like, this is the 100-foot buffer.
Yeah,
This-
yeah,
It just
yep.
says environmentally sensitive area.
yep. This
so
one's, to be honest, a little tricky because the parking lot is probably,
Yeah.
it would be in the middle of the parking lot in some of these cases,
Right.
majority of the cases, I guess. So I'm not sure if is there maybe something we could do in lieu of that? I'm not sure. We look for sort of recommendations on that, because I know typically you have 50 or 100 foot, you can put a stake out there and
Yeah.
whatever, or we could do it right at the edge of the guardrail, little, or on the
I
guardrail,
was thinking that, but we can talk about it.
something like that. We
Yeah.
certainly don't mind getting the markers with whatever recommendations to put those up. That's certainly something we could, and just if you want them every 100 feet, 50 feet, whatever, we can certainly add those. And I think maybe the guardrail itself in this case is probably I'm hesitant to call it the safest place, but the most we could put it on the other side, I guess, stake, you know. But certainly we'd look for recommendations, what you guys wanted to do with that.
All right, would someone want to make a motion, then we'll talk about what we want those stipulations to be?
I will make a motion that we recommend approval for 0 Borthwick Ave, the Liberty Mutual application with the following stipulations. The applicant create a planting plan for some plantings in kind for the removal of the 11 trees somewhere on the property. That wetland boundary markers be placed. Whatever you needed, Kate, about it being part of the deed and
Do you want to, the same wording, like for the wetland boundary marker stipulation, we do the same kind of wording for every applicant. It's, not to read it out loud, but to read it, it's in accordance with section blah, blah, blah of the zoning ordinance. Applicant shall permanently install wetland boundary markers, which may be purchased through the City of Portsmouth Planning and Sustainability Department. Specifically for this application, we recommended that wetland boundary markers be considered along the edge of the pavement, top of bank, to prevent foot traffic or unnecessary maintenance in the proposed area.
yeah,
Is that
I'm
okay?
fine with that.
And then,
And then this plan shall be entered into the chain of title for the property and
perfect.
the recorded document, that one. And then I would add, and commissioners can offer their 2 cents, but the applicant consider a more frequent monitoring schedule, just beyond the annual environmental scientist review to clear the culvert and make sure it's functioning.
Do a second
I can second.
discussion? Good with all of Jess's stipulations.
Just a comment on the wetland boundary markers.
Yeah.
I think, personally, I think doing it along the guardrail is fine. They look like they're in there with wooden posts, so maybe you could stick up something off the back of the post that was above
Sure,
the
yeah.
guardrail, so
Yep.
it was kind of clear and obvious.
Yep. Yeah, and do you want them every 50 feet or something like that? Is that what
I
the?
think that's usually like 25 or 50,
Yeah,
right?
50 feet is usually
Yeah.
50, okay.
asked for.
And I guess, I mean, this is mainly, we're talking about the stormwater area. Obviously, the parcel includes more on the site. Do you want us to just focus on this parking lot itself for those boundaries? I'm guessing that's,
I think, yeah, in connection with this project. We've talked to them about other projects
Yeah.
that they've done,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
I
I
think
just-
just kind of
I mean, it's a
what's
little-
reasonable within the parameters of this project.
yeah. Do you want the far side, like that top side boundaries?
Do you mean like the prime wetland side, like this side?
Yeah, well, actually the top, because the wetland actually comes into the top, and I don't know if it shows 100% on that plan, because it's sort of outside. The next plan above, I think, is the overview plan. Let's see. Yeah, so right up in that area too is the wetland, obviously comes on that side too. You want us just to focus on all the wetland lines that are basically shown on this plan? The northern,
I think maybe just the area that you're going to be working in.
Okay.
And the guardrail that is, right adjacent to that area.
okay, yep, I
Yeah.
just wanted to clarify while we're all here, 'cause
Yeah.
ask the question.
Yeah.
I may be thinking later, what was I supposed to do? So, okay, no, that's fine, yep.
If everyone's okay with that, yeah. Okay. Are we ready for a vote?
I was just going to add one thing. I don't know.
Yep.
It's not really as relevant in this case, but I was just going to say this project does seem to meet all of the criteria for approval, the 6 criteria.
Good job, Barbara.
Trying to remember.
Great.
Ready for a vote? All in favor? Great, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thanks so much.
Next on the agenda, we have wetland conditional use permit application for 400 Little Harbor Road. Someone here to speak to that?
Good afternoon, Eric Weinrib, 9 Middle Road and 133 Court Street, Altus Engineering. I'm the placeholder. I think we have Dylan Summers from the Society on Zoom.
Hello, everyone. Dylan Summers, Society for Protection of New Hampshire Forest, 54 Portsmouth Street, Concord, New Hampshire.
Thanks, Dylan. We just pulled up the site plan if you want to talk about that, or just let me know whatever part of the packet you'd like me to flip to.
Great. Thank you very much. I want to thank the Commission for taking the time on April 1st to come out for a site visit. I think it was very helpful to be able to look at the site after the March meeting. But once again, we are looking to do a trail maintenance project on the Little Harbor Loop Trail at our conservation property, Creek Farm. And we're addressing an area of consistent wet and muddy trail where decades of use has caused the trail surface to compact and become subgrade, which traps water and makes drainage and wet trail difficult in that area. We plan on building what is called a turnpike. It's a trail structure that uses fill to raise the trail surface above the water table, which assists in keeping the trail surface from dry while also improving drainage in the site by breaking up the compacted surface and installing some subgrade drainage stone that'll help improve drainage in the site. We plan on doing a modified version of what is shown here in this plan, the U.S. Forest Service Standard Trail Plan, where we won't be building the structure up high enough to require us to use retainers. And in this plan, it shows the shows timber and log retainers, though we shouldn't need retainers. We will there will be some amount of subgrade or subground fill above the existing ground, and then the rest of the fill will bring the surface of the trail up to a more natural, original grade, sort of flush and connected with the surrounding ground. We will include, if we need to, lead off ditches and drainage, though many areas of the site have good cross drainage and won't require that. But certain areas where the trail surface is far enough subgrade, we might provide for relief drainage to get water, have extra areas that water can get off the trail and allow it to infiltrate into the ground. Our whole project is inside of the wetland, 100-foot wetland buffer. We shouldn't need to clear any vegetation except with the exception of trimming back some areas of invasives that are encroaching on the trail corridor, and we'll trim those back to allow for equipment clearance. But besides that, our project is entirely within the existing trail and won't require any clearing of vegetation. We will try to protect vegetation where we can, especially roots that are in the existing trail. Those we can build over without cutting so that we can protect the tree health of the trees that are along the trail. And we will install silt fence or silt socks along the whole length of the project area to just as erosion control during the duration of the project, so that there's no spillage or movement of the fill that we're bringing in, though it's a pretty low slope area, so it's not a huge concern, but we'll make sure to have that. So we spoke at the last meeting. There were several concerns and thoughts that we wanted to address, which I address in an additional narrative that I submitted. But among those were questions about our choice of a turnpike versus using some sort of boardwalk or other wood bridge-like structure that would cross through the wet area. I elaborate more in this narrative, but the short version of that is that structure is less appropriate for this site, as this is not really saturated. This is not consistently saturated ground, and the wet problems we have have to do with the wear and tear on the trail, and less have to do with this being in a wetland itself. So that the turnpike is a more appropriate and cost-effective solution than building a pretty large boardwalk structure in this site that would have a much shorter lifespan and would be a bigger imposition on the landscape, including for wildlife. So I also spoke to the turnpike will improve drainage at this site by breaking up the existing soils that have been compacted by high use. Although the turnpike will include some compacted fill, the compacted aggregate, which will top the surface of it, the inclusion of drainage stone below that will ultimately make the turnpike a more permeable surface than the existing ground. And this is an example here of a turnpike that we built in Alton, New Hampshire, in 2020. This will be a little bigger of a structure than what we'll build in Portsmouth. It has the rock retainers, which we will not be building so high that we will need those, but you can see that we'll be using some sort of aggregate fill on the top, and underneath that aggregate fill in this turnpike example, there is a layer of 1.5 inch crushed stone that is good drainage stone. So I don't know if there is anything else I should add to in terms of the project. One other thing that was brought up was accessibility. One of our big motivations of doing this project is improve the accessibility of the trail. The existing ground being really wet and having large exposed roots is an accessibility issue for a lot of users. While this isn't designed to be a universally accessible trail that can be accessed by anyone in a wheelchair or anything or something like that, a lot of people who might have more fitness might have access to better equipment, like different types of wheelchairs. People who have mobility issues that don't require them to be in a wheelchair, or people using strollers or things like that will all find improved access by addressing the muddy areas and the exposed roots, which are the biggest barriers along this section of trail to accessing the scenic areas around Sagamore Creek that the trail goes to. So that's a major motivation for why we want to do this, and we think it's an important part of our project. The commission requested us to add the 25-foot buffer to our site plan, which I have done so. We also requested having the plan stamped by the wetland scientist who originally did the delineation for a different project in 2020. Joseph Noel delineated this site, and we had Joseph back. He was able to check the delineation and confirm that nothing has changed, as well as flag the section, the highest observable tide line along the section of trail that we will be working in. And he provided a separate report, stamped and signed, which is attached to the application. And I don't think I have any other things to add to that at this time. But please let me know if I missed something.
Great, thank you. Questions from the commissioners? Go ahead, Alice.
I was wondering if you could talk to us about the overall width of this installation. I was looking at the cross section, and then your narrative said that it was 3 feet, but that just sort of orient us a little bit as to, like, in comparison to the Mount Major photo, for example, like.
Yes,
what are we talking
exactly.
about?
So, I mean, originally when I was thinking about this project, and as I talked to our contractors that we're looking at this project with, we've changed parameters somewhat. But if we had used retaining rock like in that photo, the width of the trail surface would be 3 feet plus the room for retainment. But because we've decided that that's not really required at this site and isn't really appropriate, it would actually, could cause more problems than it would solve. We've decided that more or less the impacted width of the trail is will be where the fill will be. So we're thinking about, it might change somewhat over the course of the trail corridor, depending on how narrow or wide it is, but we will fill the areas that need to be filled. But the final width should be around 3 to 4 feet. And we'll use a combination of fill, but also using the soil and that we take out of the trail to add fill in other places and kind of narrow the width of the trail by using some fill that we're bringing in and some fill that we're taking from the trail surface to to build up the turnpike, to narrow the spot trail, especially in the spots where the trail has gotten to more like 6, 7, 8 feet wide because people are avoiding the muddy areas. We will try to use the fill that we're bringing in to make a 3 or 4 foot wide tread, while other areas will be restored.
Okay, so
Does that answer your question?
Kind of. I think when you say 3 to 4 feet, and then I'm referring to the cross section, there's something that's labeled as tread width, and then there's shoulders on top of that. So I'm just
Are
wondering,
we
like,
referring to the plan in the, yes.
I guess the reason I'm asking the question is just because, like, for example, in the Mount Major installation, like, although that made a lot of improvements, it does feel very wide, and this trail system is so intimate, and I would hope that we try to sort of maintain that.
Thank you. The Mount Major is the example I had on hand of a structure that we had built that was similar in the past. That existing trail was as wide as you see in that photo. It was an old road that had become very far subgrade over decades of erosion. So it needed a much more substantial structure. We don't plan on expanding the existing trail corridor at all. This will remain as wide or narrower than the existing trail corridor as it stands today. You know, we're not going to have any impact outside of that. And if anything, our goal is to narrow the trail corridor and restore areas that have gotten wide because of use. You know, one of the biggest impacts that we see with muddy sections of trail, and one of our biggest motivations for building a structure like this, is that hikers, walkers will go around mud and they'll walk along the edge of muddy areas, and that eventually over time makes the problem worse, where the sections that they're walking on now are also becoming muddy, and then they go even further, and over time the trail expands. And I've seen trails get up to, like, you know, 15 feet wide when they should be like a relatively narrow path. You can see in this photo, and these are good examples of how there's a compacted on the right side of the trail in this photo. In photo 1, you can see there's a compacted area just uphill from those spots of mud. And that's an example of where people are hiking around the mud rather than staying in the trail corridor. So overall, if anything, we will be restoring the width of the trail corridor and not expanding it. It won't really look much like, a lot like what I showed in the photo from Mount Major. And the only reason that one is so wide is because it's an extraordinarily high use trail. One of the most popular trails in the state, certainly one of the most popular in the Lakes region, sees about 80,000 people a year. And the existing trail corridor was an old road, so we had to essentially work with the whole area because of how eroded it was. We had not much choice but to restore that whole width. And it's appropriate for that site, as there's, in the summertime especially, frequent two-way traffic. This trail is very different, still high use, but not on that level. So we will be keeping the trail at the existing width and trying where it's become really wide to restore areas to make it a more consistent width, and restore areas that have been impacted by people avoiding the mud.
Great, thank you.
I had a follow-up a little bit to that, just to clarify, because I was thinking the same question, but you do have in your narrative that your planned turnpike would be 45 feet wide with a 36-inch finished walking surface. So that feels like you wouldn't be going more than 5 feet with the whole trail.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so if, you know, it's good that it's written in there. If that's what your intent is, that sounds good.
Yeah, and the existing trail is about 5 to 6 feet, except in the certain areas which have gotten to where the impact I was referring to earlier, where they've gotten to 8, 9, and maybe as much as 10 in one spot on the trail.
And then to go along with that, I just wanted to clarify too on the routes that you had said today, and then when we were on the site too, that you guys wouldn't need to be really digging up roots. You might have to do a little bit of work, and I didn't really see that in the narrative, but I might have missed it.
I might have forgotten to add that particular thing to the narrative. I do, I think, make a note of it where on the site plan, pointing out the trees that have the most exposed roots, and that where we would be building, where we would be going over those roots rather than taking them out. Okay. So that area right there that is pointed out in the site plan is where there are the most roots. There are other areas with exposed roots along this section. That's kind of the second area of Turnpike. But those will generally be, we will build over pretty much all of the roots. I didn't see any roots that felt like this is not really workable and we would need to take this out, so.
Okay, thank you.
I think my biggest takeaway was, or at the site visit, was just that this will be effectively re-narrowing the trail, which I'm really excited about. Dylan, my question is, do you anticipate planting in those areas that'll be revegetated, or will you kind of plan to have it do so naturally?
I think we plan to have it do it naturally. You know, I don't want to necessarily change the character of the existing trail by introducing plantings that would be kind of feel more artificial and feel more like they were, you know, purpose built. I think the advantage of letting things happen naturally is that it will be easier to maintain. We don't have to maintain planted shrubs that might require more care, as well as it will kind of happen more organically in a more naturally feeling way, rather than, you know, having plantings that were kind of introduced in a manner that feels more human driven than natural, particularly in the areas that have gotten the widest, which are a little further along in the trail, and the areas that are more forested. The natural ground is more like leaf litter. So if you put in a shrub and maintained it, it's going to feel less part of the forest than if you just recover that ground in leaf litter and allow plants to grow naturally in that zone.
I have a question. At the last meeting, we had a discussion about educational signage, and I was wondering if you had any more thoughts about opportunities for that throughout this site and trail and overall, you know, plan.
I think, you know, particularly on this trail, we try to be very sensitive about the amount of signage we include. And, you know, we think carefully about where things like blazes, which help guide hikers go. We try not to over-introduce those onto the trail. So we are trying to emphasize and reduce signage, if anything, as much as possible. Because we recognize sometimes with lots of educational signage and things like that, it can get out of control and can kind of affect user experience. I think that I don't know if would be excited about a lot of signage here. I think it would really affect how we've managed the user experience in this place. This isn't intended to be a place where there's like books on sticks, if you will. That's what we're referring to interpretive signs, which have a lot of text and kind of are very like a visible human thing in the landscape. So I think we would really like to try and minimize the amount of signage we have at this site, and kind of let that natural experience be.
Yep, understood. Thank you.
Just to kind of build on that, I just, because this has come up a couple times now, is just thinking about like just playing out the thought exercise. Like if you were to put a placard up, where would be the most appropriate place? And to me, the place that, you know, you could put it, you know, right, just again, just a little like 3-inch round thing would be the transition from the mowed grass into the wooded area, which is, you know, part of the buffer zone, where it really is like very much a transition from a very manicured, developed place. There's a home, there's a parking lot. I mean, you really are transitioning into the woods at that point, and into a protected wetland space. I don't know, that would be like the place that I would encourage you to just consider putting up a placard. And it could just be a single one, and then it just allows for like a little bit more recognition of that placard. The more times we are able to put it out into the public spaces, the more people see it and will recognize it. And I do note that you have some signage along the restored section of your waterfront in front of Carey Cottage, which is nice to see. Just a little acknowledgement of what that is.
Yeah, absolutely. And You know, if anything, I think considering putting a placard in that area where we do have existing signage and we do have that, that fencing up, that's an area where like there's already kind of that visual impact from our efforts to restore and regenerate that area, and feels like maybe a more appropriate place if we were to do it.
Yeah, and that's also like a typical place where people put their placards, is kind of the edge of the mow line, and that is kind of the edge of your mow line.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just had one other comment. I'm just, again, thinking about our criteria for approval here, and kind of understand that, right, keeping the existing location for the trail makes a lot of sense for a lot of reasons and allows people to experience this amazing place. I think it's just worth just noting that by kind of improving the trail, you are, you know, kind of encouraging additional traffic to kind of the edge of Little Harbor there. And that is, you know, that trail takes you to a very sensitive place. And essentially, at the end of that trail, folks are kind of walking through a wetland. And that's a tidal wetland. It's going to get increasingly wet over the years, and that trail that goes right along the shore and creates the kind of the Little Harbor Loop Trail is going to become kind of increasingly kind of hard to manage, I'm guessing. And I just think it's worth just kind of noting that. I'd love to just have it in the record, and that at some point it might be worth considering, you know, a potential kind of reroute for that part of the trail to make it a proper loop. But I appreciate, you know, this trail improvement piece of it, because it does allow people to kind of get out to the coast. And then, you know, in the future you can think about whether you want to continue encouraging people to do the full loop along the shoreline, or just have them backtrack and consider a different way to, you know, maintain the loop trail.
No, absolutely. That's definitely something that, you know, we don't have any firm plans of right now, but it has been discussed as options of what improving further sections. I think we see a lot of use in this first area where we, you know, we get a lot of different user groups at this location. Some people are more here to walk their dogs. They're not going very far, or going for short walks. And it's a really good opportunity for people. Again, part of the reason we're improving accessibility is it's a good opportunity for people who might not be able to go as far to have a very short walk they can take to a really scenic area. But that being said, we don't want to completely neglect the rest of the loop experience. I think we might think about managing it differently in terms of what we want the user experience, especially once you get off of our property and onto the Wentworth Mansion State Park and the city of Portsmouth land that the rest of the loop goes along. The trail experience does change. It becomes more primitive, and that's okay. So we kind of will think about in the future how we want to manage like those other parts. And for us, it's really the part that continues along the shore, and what we can do with that and what feels appropriate to do with that. So I appreciate your input and your comments. Thank you.
Any further questions?
Yeah, I just have one administrative question. Do you guys post notice of construction prior to mobilization?
We will basically, yes, we will kind of post signs that let people know that we'll be closing this trail for a week or maybe 2 at most. So we'll post a notice that will tell people when the expected time period is, just to let people know that this won't be accessible during that period, and let them know when they can expect to come back.
Okay, you ready for a motion?
I will make a motion that we recommend approval for the wetland conditional use permit for 400 Little Harbor Road.
I'll second.
Any further discussion?
I didn't know if we wanted, like, it's just a formality really, but basically what Lynn was talking about a little bit, about considering in future.
As a stipulation,
As a stipulation, just so it's in there, it's not gonna hold them their feet to the fire on anything, but.
So is this the considering of the more extensive use of the trail in the future, or the signage portion that she was referring to, or both?
I was thinking of the more extensive use of the trail, like consider rerouting or mitigating
Okay.
the trail along the shoreline in future planning
Okay.
purposes or something like that. It's not, it's pretty arbitrary, but.
I think on that point, maybe also just adding consider the, any opportunities to do signage where it's appropriate, you know, and leave it at their discretion. Sure. If people are okay with that.
Wetland, excuse me, wetland-specific signage where appropriate, or just general?
Yeah, I think.
A placard
the
or an
placard,
alternative.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's a small thing, right? But it is interesting to think about consistency across projects.
Did we have a second?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Are you guys okay with the adding?
Are we ready for a vote? All in favor? Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, moving along, next on the agenda is the wetland conditional use permit application for 134 Pleasant Street, which also has a State Wetland Bureau application. Is anyone here to speak to that? If you want to speak to both the
Yes. if we
city
could-
permit and the
yes,
state, tell us if there's anything different in the state, and we'll vote on them separately, but
Yes.
I'll hear it at once.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Conservation Commission. John Chagnon from Haley Ward, representing the applicant on this project. I do have a plan I wanted to hand out that represents a minor change to the impact. So the project was at the planning board meeting last month, and was an issue that came up relative to access to the Parrott Avenue parking lot from the project site. Excuse me. So essentially, the design team has redesigned the project access at 134 Pleasant, the redevelopment site. And just for the sake of the public and presentation purposes, we're here because the 134 Pleasant Street project has been asked to separate an existing combined stormwater sewer system, separate that stormwater flow so that it doesn't go to the sewer treatment plant and be a burden on the treatment plant. There's a lot of CSOs in this neighborhood. So in order to do that, the nearest point of connection is on the southerly side of the Parrott Avenue parking lot, and on the opposite side of Parrott Avenue is the South Mill Pond, and it does have a salt marsh edge, and this catch basin is within 75 feet of that salt marsh edge. So where we had initially come in with a minimum impact expedited, we cannot do that because of the 75-foot closeness. So we're going to be changing that to a regular wetland app. I don't think that would change your deliberations or recommendations, but it means that we'll just be filing that with the clerk, and there wouldn't be a conservation signature for that particular application type. But what I was getting at earlier was the site currently accesses the Parrott Avenue parking lot, and we believe that that site does have rights in that access, but some issues have been brought up by the city that that might not be the case in their opinion. So the design team redesigned the 134 Pleasant Street site to terminate in a turnaround So traffic will come in and out of Pleasant Street and not access city property whatsoever. So what that means is, the handout you have, it won't be projectable, but if you look at the top left portion of the impact, the impact is reduced because all we need to do is adjust the curbing at the edge of the two properties and provide a fire department crash gate for emergency access in that existing opening. So that's just a point of information. The plan that goes with the DES wetland application and the plan that goes to the planning board for conditional use permit will show a reduction in overall impact to the shoreland zone. I think the conditional use permit for the city is the first 100 feet, not the 250 feet. So we're here today also on the conditional use permit application, and hopefully you will recommend to the planning board that they grant that conditional use permit. We submitted material in the package relative to the 5 criteria, and I won't belabor that here in deference to your time that you've put in, and it's in the record unless somebody wants me to talk about it. We had a site walk, and I think all the commission members that came realized that this is pretty much a temporary impact. We have to excavate to place a pipe, and then we will cover it back up and put the pavement back. So the net result is that you won't see any changes to the site after the project is completed. That pretty much sums it up, unless you want me to spend more time on it. I think it's a relatively simple thing, and we look forward to getting your both your DES and Portsmouth conditional use permit approval recommendations if you're so inclined. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from the commissioners? Is anything happening to there's like a planting island kind of towards the end of where you're working? Is anything happening with that?
So, excuse me, if you want to scroll that down, I think you're talking about what was a planting area over here. There was in the design, but in the package you have before you
Yep.
today, we've sort of moved that planting area, shifted it a little bit to the east. There's still a planting area there.
Yeah,
And-
keep going, sorry.
No, am I zeroing in on the area?
I think I'm talking about the farthest south, just where it looks like it's, there's a line of trees, and I just didn't know if if
Yeah.
it was disturbing any of that or not.
No,
Okay.
the impacts go out a bit just because of, that's the way we draw the impacts is,
Yeah.
From the pipe.
Yeah.
But they're going to be accessing the north side of that catch basin, so they shouldn't really need to even excavate in that island.
Okay, that was my question.
Yeah, that's your question. And so there's no intent to do anything to that island, except maybe incidentally they might have to.
And then my other question, can you just point out for everyone to see there was a jellyfish filter that's going to be installed, is that correct?
Yes, so if you
Where
go.
is that going?
If you go up to I think I included some plans from the development site. Yep, oh, that was it. Yeah, this is good. So the site, 134 Pleasant site drainage, the roof drainage is going to go and connect into this drain line. The street and surface drainage will connect to a drain manhole that will feed that runoff into a jellyfish filter and then recombine with the other runoff before it exits the 134 Pleasant site and travels across city property.
So is only one section being run through the jellyfish filter, is that?
All of the surface,
Okay,
the roof drainage is currently separated on the on the existing building, and it will maintain that separation and the new roof runoff from the new building that's being constructed in the area between the existing building and Pleasant Street.
Yep.
That roof runoff will also just travel through the building and be discharged
Okay.
that way.
Okay.
And that meets the Portsmouth stormwater redevelopment criteria of 40% of the site having advanced treatment.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Okay?
And I think the other thing we figured out is that the municipal lot there, is gonna go now into a separated system. And that portion of the runoff isn't gonna go through the jellyfish, so it isn't getting that treatment. And it is now, rather than going to the sewer system, it is now going out the stormwater outfall into Mill Pond.
Okay.
So it's just sort of worth noting that it is like increasing a little bit of runoff
Yeah.
to the Mill Pond, even though it's, the whole project has, a net benefit, but.
Right, right. And I looked for that outfall after
Yeah.
our site walk. I went back and I think it runs down Junkins Avenue and goes into the culvert under the street.
Way, yeah.
Because there are no outfalls in that vicinity. So it must run down. There's two arch culverts connect the mill pond. And I think it must dump into that culvert under the road.
Yeah, into the lower part of the Mill Pond, yeah.
Well, in the separation, when they built Junkins Avenue across the pond, they put in some arch culverts. But there's no outfall from that drainage system that's visible on the shore. So the pipes do go into the road, and I think they go down the road and tie in. So you had asked about erosion at the outfall, and I think it won't because it's going into that box culvert.
But that eventually goes into the Mill Pond.
Right, but it doesn't create an infiltrative point source problem, which is what I thought you were saying. Like, if there was an existing outfall, it's going to see more flow, it might scour. I don't think it will, because it's not an outfall. It goes into a culvert,
Which is like big and doesn't
arch culvert. Yeah.
kind of concentrate it in that same way. Is that what you're?
No, I thought you were speaking to the issue of increased erosion at the outfall.
Yeah.
And
I guess I'm like the terminology's like I'm not perfectly fluent in all the terminology, but because because the outlet is big, you're saying is a box culvert.
That's concrete, is that also?
Yeah.
Right, it's a concrete culvert.
Okay.
It's not like dripping onto the shore.
Okay. Because it's further out into the water, kind of thing.
It's in a structure that's already stable.
Yeah.
Maybe put it that way.
Okay. That's
As
helpful.
opposed to dumping onto the shore, which could be unstable if
Could
there was
be,
more
yeah.
runoff.
Okay, that's helpful to know. Yeah. Like the Mill Pond stormwater stuff is like sort of an interesting story, right? Like how many mysteries there are. Like, and
yeah.
it's gotten so much better since I was a kid.
Yeah, it's miles above the old days when it used to have to be drained and then
Yeah,
you
well,
knew when
that-
it was drained, right?
It had that very distinct smell during, periods of time.
So part of this is taking out any, or there are probably still some stormwater connections, so they used to, when it rained heavy, there were overflows
Yeah.
from the storm, the sewer system overflowed into the pond, and so this is a further reducing of that probability, so it's a pretty, it's a good project environmentally in that regard.
Any further questions? You ready for a motion for the wetland conditional use permit? Start with that one.
I will make a motion that we recommend approval for the wetland conditional use permit for 134 Pleasant Street. I'm not sure if there are any stipulations. I didn't hear any specific, but
Was there anything?
you had
in
a
the staff
stamped
memo?
one? Do you need it?
Yeah, from the staff memo, I think we just need the stamped version on your digital file for if you were the wetland scientist to stamp or delineate the wetland. to just get that signed, stamped, and dated on at least one of the plans, preferably the permit, the DES permit plan that we'll keep on file.
Yeah, so we'll probably give you, so, yeah, we can do that. We might put it on the existing conditions plan
Oh, yeah, that works too.
because the delineator is no longer with the company, so to chase him down to stamp plans that might have revisions.
Right, yeah.
So
That works.
we'll add it existing conditions plan.
Okay.
Is there anything else? Oh, is this one with the waiver?
Yeah, I don't know how much I want to. Well, so I'll just kind of quickly have this discussion. When Peter and I were talking about this project and, you know, projects in tonight's meeting, we kind of discussed how a lot of them have similarities and that some of these projects maybe aren't so applicable for some of our requirements. So one of our requirements that would apply here is that it's in a tidal shoreline buffer, so we're required to see a living shoreline plan. This is a funky permit where I don't think it makes sense to see a wetland-like enhancement plan of the shoreline and like of the marsh. Another thing would be porous pavement, where if new pavement is being introduced, or if something's being repaved, we want to see that become porous pavement. This is such a like small and narrow kind of repair project and pipe insertion project that I don't see why we would ever want like a little porous section to be put in. So I was thinking of, instead of, you know, just letting them go without these, we kind of make it maybe a standard thing to recommend that they request waivers from these sections from the planning board, so it's more well documented, like this is why they didn't meet this criteria because it was felt at the Conservation Commission that they didn't need it, just so we're more explicit in our decision making. And the other one that I was thinking about was wetland boundary placards for this project. I don't know, you guys might feel it's appropriate. I don't know, we can talk a little bit more about that, but trying to figure out if that's something we want to recommend that they don't do or that they do, maybe somewhere off-site. I'm not sure, but I just wanted to kind of bring up this idea that there are some requirements here that I don't think staff is comfortable making them abide to. So it's up to you guys.
Okay, so right now we have, did you do the motion?
I made the motion, yes.
Should we add the stipulation about the stamped and signing? And then maybe we get a second, we go to discussion, we talk about those other two? Did you want to stipulate that? Okay.
Yep, that's fine with me.
I can do a second.
Okay. All right, so then the question is what Kate brought up regarding the porous pavement, the
Living shoreline.
the living shoreline, and then the placards. Are those the three?
Those are the three kind of requirements that this hits.
That normally we would require those from a project, but whether or not this,
Yeah, and even if it's just having a discussion about, having a recorded, like in the meeting minutes, discussion about, you know, we discussed this requirement and the commission decided that it wasn't applicable in this case. I think that's probably plenty too, instead of, you know, setting up this new system of waivers for us. But I just thought it would be good to start talking about, you know, exactly, explicitly in the minutes. We talked about this, but we don't think it's appropriate.
I think that'd be great.
Yeah.
And like,
Documenting it in the minutes, I think, is a first middle ground approach. And then if for some reason that's not sufficiently explicit, you could proceed to talk about the waivers maybe.
I think that's a great idea.
it seems like part of that too is just for us, like documenting when and why we would make that determination.
Yeah.
Similarly for the placards, like just being a little bit explicit about
Yeah.
when we're gonna,
Yeah.
enforce that.
I guess I could see it being nice in future applications, like in their narratives, they'd say like, we believe that this doesn't apply. It's not really a waiver, but it's just kind of does the work of the conversation before when you get there,
Yeah, that's a good point.
Question?
Sure.
I apologize, I didn't research this specifically, but I don't know a lot of ordinances have, when you're doing a strict utility pipe placement, then these things don't apply under the ordinance already, you know? I don't know if that's the case here, but that might be another approach for the future, is that if you're doing something that just digs, puts a pipe in and restores exactly to what it was, maybe this portions don't apply, just a thought.
Yeah, Kate, does
an
this,
example?
does this fall under the public and private utilities? No.
So we
Within the
do
right of
have,
way?
public utility, so this isn't, this is public property, but not necessarily part of like our right-of-way, where we do normal utilities. But we do have an exemption for certain right-of-way projects. But I think the reason that this was not exempt was because it's the introduction of new permanent impacts underground, and we didn't feel it kind of qualified for that. But we usually do, you know, for replacement of sidewalks existing in kind, you know, making them new again or repaving, things like that. We usually have that kind of exemption.
I feel like this is similar enough to that, to the utilities things, that, at least for this particular project, I would be okay with kind of, like you said, like waiving the living shoreline, the, I don't know what, porous pavement.
Porous pavement and the placards.
Yeah, I don't know, how do people feel about the placards? I mean, I don't really know where they would go/be helpful in this. It's more, you know, stuff around the South Mill Pond that it would be more important, if at all.
That would be the logical place, which is like really off-site for
right.
this project, although I guess it's probably municipal property, right?
I feel like that's, again, the conversation we've talked about of like more public city parcels and the signage usage on those as opposed to this particular project. That's my opinion.
I mean, I don't know, you know, the project, for example, could agree to pay for the placard and the city puts it up, you know, on the other side of the road there, on the edge of the, you know, the grassy area around the mill pond, on a little tree, just one, or, I don't know, I mean, like, we could just have a,
I feel like it needs to be part of like a more like comprehensive plan
for the whole mill
pond,
pond.
and just like one placard would be my thought.
Yeah, fair.
Probably, I mean, this is probably obvious, but whatever we're going to do there seems like it needs to have some other basis besides our own opinions.
Yeah.
Because of how many times other cases come and people have a different opinion themselves about the value of the placard. So I would just want to be careful if we note something in here as a recommendation, that it has a more solid basis to point to that we can be consistent with than just an opinion.
Yep.
Although granted, our opinion is usually, hopefully, as or more informed.
What do we think? Are we in favor of feeling like these are not, we don't feel like they should be required for this project? Yeah? Okay.
Instead of pursuing the whole waiver thing, and I think your point was really good, is there a statement that we can, because I'm assuming the planning board does not have the time to listen to this entire discussion. So is there a statement that we could just include that says, you know, the commission made this recommendation with the understanding of waiving those sectional requirements because of the nature of this project and the utility of it, and something along
Or
those
just
lines.
did not
just to
feel they
kind
were
of-
applicable?
Yeah,
Maybe
or
getting rid of
something
the
like
waiving
that. So it's,
terminology.
again, it's kind of supporting why we're, and for the record.
I think that sounds great.
Are we ready
If
for a vote?
other commissioners agree, and feel that's appropriate.
I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah. You ready?
I think, not to belabor this, but Kate, you said a few specific reasons
Yeah.
on why we go that way. I just think it might be best to advise them that that's why, and it's recorded that way. Because then in the future, we can point to the same thing. Is this project consistent with the other projects? You know my penchant for,
Yeah.
I guess, all of us for consistency,
Yeah.
so. And I think you had 2 or 3 specific examples that have been precedent, right?
Yeah, I think, we can point to, it's a utility project, it's it's for the public good, I think also, and maybe John didn't kind of mention this as much, is that this is kind of a requirement of the site plan project that's going on just north of it, and this is kind of the applicant's way of offsetting some of those impacts and helping to implement some public realm improvements off-site with our own city land, which is always a good thing. So I think that's kind of something that we don't want to create a barrier to. So that's, another reasoning that I can see.
So it could just be, I guess, summing that up, that the commission recommends waiving those per your recommendation, and just a brief citing of what you just said as the basis for that recommendation of waiver. I guess is what I'm advocating, without requiring too much additional language or work for you, Kate.
Yeah.
Excuse me?
You go ahead.
I think you don't want to say that you're recommending a waiver. I think what you wanted to say is that you've concluded that this project is a public utility, essentially, that it qualifies in that section.
Yeah.
Not that you recommend the planning board waive anything. You're saying it's not subject to the waiver because it's really akin to, and you mentioned the sidewalk, but also you replace drain and sewer lines in wetland buffers all the time, in roads, so. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, just with the language of how we,
Yeah.
yeah.
'Cause I thought that's what you were going to.
I think that's what we're all saying. We're just trying to figure out, how to make that one statement, to make it clear to the planning board and our reasoning, and making the reasoning, be more about what the project is and not trying to waive something necessarily.
Makes
I think
sense.
do we feel like we have it?
Yeah, I think I like what Jess said. She said stating was not applicable due to the nature of this project, and then kind of listing those reasons.
Okay.
But then also including that one stipulation that we do have for the wetland scientist stamp.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are we ready for a vote?
I think we need a second.
Oh, did we never have a second?
Not yet.
I think I did a second.
Yeah.
Did you? Okay,
I think
sorry.
we had a second. We did? All right, all in favor? Great. And then, Kate, what do we do,
Because it's different.
because it's not a minimum impact anymore, they're filing a, whatever the opposite of a minimum impact is, standard?
Minor. It's a minor. Yeah.
So it'll be an expedited minor impact?
It's because of salt marsh, it's a minor. It doesn't qualify for expedited.
Okay, so it won't come as a minimum impact?
It won't. It will just be filed with the clerk
Okay,
and go through the regular minor wetland app process.
okay.
And you had determined, I think they determined that we just wouldn't sign it.
Okay.
But
What's that? Sorry?
you had determined that we just wouldn't sign it. The application
Correct.
would
You
go
don't
to-
sign the minors.
Okay.
But they get, you do make, in the 30 days, you can comment to DES. So that's what you're doing, I think, is hopefully commenting about this minor app.
So do we need to do anything with this being on the agenda, the minimum impact?
So we'll just have to ask the applicant to submit an official withdrawal, and we'll just postpone until the withdrawal is, or I guess, actually,
Could we
request a
submit
withdrawal right now.
I know it was advertised this way, but we could submit a piece of paper that says we're requesting that the application type be changed to minor. I mean, the only thing that changes is, I believe, and Keegan Farrow is here, he can speak to it, that we have to just add 10 pages to the wetland app to talk about, the fact that it's within 75 feet. It's like 70 feet from, the catch basin is 70 feet from the salt marsh. So we have to provide other details about it, but it doesn't change, it doesn't impact the salt marsh.
Yeah,
It's
I'm
just that a salt marsh
From
is
a
there.
procedural standpoint, I'm just not sure what to do with this
Yeah.
item on the agenda, whether.
I think if we, if you don't feel comfortable changing it, the wetland application is going to be filed, and within the 30 days, your next meeting will occur. So I guess we could come back.
So are you gonna edit the impact numbers at all in the shoreline zone?
Yes, yeah, because we have new numbers. So in the final wetland, the shoreland application that you see here was approved. The shoreland numbers, we have a shoreland permit, it was approved, and that allows us to impact that square footage. We're not going to revise it because we're going down in the impact.
Okay, well, let's see, sounds like it might be, well, our recommendation, if we choose to have the same recommendation as the wetland permit, doesn't really have any stipulations that are concerning for DES.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we would even need to send any sort of letter or comments to DES if it turns into a minor permit. So
Could he just withdraw this one right now, and then that be the end of it, because we're not
Yeah.
gonna sign the other one?
yeah, we definitely don't need to see the other one, just the clerk needs to put it on file. But if you want to officially withdraw the state minimum impact permit,
Verbally, like right now?
you can verbally do it right now, and then also send me a follow-up email so I can put it on file, just saying that it was pulled, and we can just,
Question for you. I think the standard app process, the clerk gets it gets sent around, and then you have 30 days to comment to DES, but you don't have to comment, right?
so it is a minimum impact,
No,
Is
it's
it a-
minor. It's minor.
but it's a standard dredge and fill?
Yeah, it has to go minor because it can't be minimum impact if it's within 75 feet of a salt marsh.
Okay.
So we had to change the app type, but the impacts don't change in the buffer zone. The buffer zone impacts don't change, but that, instead of having the commission sign the app as proof that you reviewed it, I believe you just get 30 days to send comments. I'm not sure, because I'm not sitting on your side, whether the state always says, hey, where are your comments? Or if you don't make comments, they just don't have comments. I don't know.
Right.
Do they hound us for comments?
I can't say they do, but we can always, send a typical letter saying that we reviewed this as a minimum impact. We understand it might be changing to a minor impact. We recommend approval of the impacts that were stated,
Okay.
something
I would
like that.
support that, yeah.
Just to
that
cover
sounds-
bases.
Yeah. Yep.
And maybe we'll make no actions on this. Well, actually, that'll be our action. What am I saying? That will, if everyone votes.
Make a motion about that?
So
Just a motion that we'll send.
a letter. How about I will make a motion for the State Wetland Bureau application dredge and fill as on our agenda as a minimum impact with the potential to be moving to a minor impact application for 134 Pleasant Street. That a letter be filed with NHDES on our behalf saying we've reviewed this application and we recommend approval.
Perfect.
Love it. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All right, all in favor? Great. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, so it is 5:40. Before we start this one, I just, how are people's timelines tonight with going past 6?
I can do that. I can do a half hour or so.
To a 6:30 would be our, okay.
I'm okay.
Yeah? Okay. All right, so, next on the agenda, we have 5 Couriers Cove, wetland conditional use application and major impact dredge and fill.
Chairperson,
Yes.
I am going to
Oh, yes.
recuse myself from
Yep.
this application.
I should say Talia's online
Oh.
via Zoom.
Hi, Talia.
popped on, so.
Hello. I can vote on this.
Does that mean she votes because we have a recusal?
Yeah, Talia, if you're interested in voting, we can have you vote
Yeah,
on this because Jess just recused, and we'll do a roll call vote.
Can you hear me when I'm talking?
Yep.
Like this?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's totally good. That
Okay.
works for me.
Okay, thanks.
I'm still here, Madam Chair, members of the commission, John Chagnon from Haley Ward. With me today, we have Julian Jalbert, is the project architect, Zig, I'm not going to say this right, but Zandon, who's the landscape architect, and Keegan Farrell from Haley Ward, who's the permit specialist. And we're here today on behalf of Jill and Scott Migliori for a proposed deck at 5 Courier's Cove. The material was submitted, and the staff memo identified some issues. So we'd like to hand out some new material, and I think that the material that we've provided hopefully will serve to enliven the discussion and answer your questions. For the benefit of the public, I could quickly walk through the plan set and talk about what the project is, just for the record. And once Kate gets back to the flipping the switch, and then I'll be turning it over to Keegan for more insight into your criteria and discussions about your comments. So 5 Courier Cove is off of Little Harbor Road. It's an existing single-family dwelling with a garage on the south side. Currently, there isn't a deck on the water side, but there is a stone patio that's within the 50-foot primary structure setback of the New Hampshire DES and the 50-foot Portsmouth buffer. In the material that you were just handed, I just want to point out that the second page of 11 by 17, or the second page in the plan set, one of the comments was to highlight the cities 25 and 50 and 100. So this plan has been updated to show that. But going back to the initial submission, Kate, the next page is an existing conditions and demolition plan. We're removing some hard surfaces that are within the 50-foot and 100-foot line. Next plan shows I think that's 2 plans down. I'm not. This should be a site plan. Yeah. Sorry, I'm sorry, this is the site plan, my mistake, sorry. So the site plan shows the red is this hard surfaces that are going to be removed, and it shows the construction of a deck on the shore side of the existing home. So that's the project is a deck addition to provide some outdoor space that is not directly attached to the shore surface. The next sheet in the initial submission is a landscape plan, or there's a grading plan, some minor grading just to raise the grade as we talked about on the site walk. I think most of you were there. And then there's a landscape plan that was developed by the Knickerbocker Group. So a full complement of shore and other plantings even outside of the 100-foot. And then the next plan is our DES permit plan with impacts. And Keegan will go over, I think that we included planting impacts as impacts on this plan, but they really aren't, because you can plant in the tidal buffer zone to your heart's content, and then there's a detail sheet. So with that, I will turn it over to Keegan, and he's going to go through, not in exact order of your 1 through 6 comments, but in general, he's got a submission and he talks about the looming shoreline and other things. Thank you.
Hi, folks. So yeah, just in response to the memo that we had received.
Can you just, sorry, state your name just for the record, so it's
Oh,
on the.
sorry. Yeah, my name's Keegan Furo. I work for Haley Ward as a permitting specialist, and I've been working on the DES applications for this deck construction project.
Perfect, thank you.
So yeah, so just in response to the memo that we received, I believe it was late last week or early this week, I provided a document just kind of breaking down the current plans of the project and how they apply to the different criteria for approval. I'm just going to read through some of my responses to your comments. I'll make sure to reference what your comments were. But so starting off with the first comment that we had received, basically the land is almost entirely located within the tidal buffer zone. And there is a very sensitive high marsh habitat below the highest observable tide line of the applicant's property. It was discussed that a living shoreline strategy would help mitigate the impacts from construction and long-term impacts from the increased impervious area within the shoreline zone. So one of your comments was that the application is missing a living shoreline strategy pursuant to section 10.1017.26. I think the intent really of the shoreline planting there was to duly serve as a living shoreline buffer. All that material is woody shrub material, so it was really planted with the consideration of the increased impervious area. We're not proposing to plant grasses, ferns in that area. We really wanted something to bolster the shoreline in that location and also to tie into the existing forested and scrub shrub upland riparian area. And we've, in the plan set that you have now on the planting plan, you can see just what sorts of vegetation is proposed in those areas. Second comment, it was commented that a wetland buffer enhancement plan should include long-term maintenance plans. In the plan set you have been provided, we have added a long-term maintenance plan to sheet C103, prepared by the Knickerbocker group. And essentially, just boiling it down, it includes monitoring the vegetation throughout the initial first, I think, 1 to 3 years to ensure that there's an 85% survival of the planted vegetation, or at least to an extent, well, to an extent that would meet the minimum DES shoreland point score requirements, whichever would be more. There's some other information about how it's going to be maintained in terms of invasive species, also how fertilizers and pesticides are going to be prohibited within the buffer and whatnot. So the third comment, the application has not provided any alternatives at this stage. There's an alternatives analysis that was provided in the NHDES wetlands application on pages 21 through 22. I don't believe that's included in the packet that you received today. That's going to be within the NHDES application that was uploaded to the portal. But we did talk about some alternative locations for the deck, alternative sizings for the deck, whether or not the deck was actually needed, and other avoidance and minimization measures. The fourth comment, the application does not delineate the 25-foot vegetative buffer strip. We included the updated 25-foot no-cut buffer and the 50-foot limited cut buffer in the existing condition plan set. And just to be clear, there is no removal of vegetation proposed within the 25-foot vegetated no-cut buffer. Yeah, it should be sheet V101 that has those updated buffers highlighted. The fifth comment, application does not consider temporary versus permanent impacts as a part of this project. Please include all grading and fill areas and areas to be disturbed as impact areas. As John had mentioned, we updated the plan set on the impact plan to show the graded areas as additional impacts. So that should be on sheet C104, I believe. Also, the erosion control measures, sixth comment, the erosion control measures should be shown on the plans. That has been updated. The applicant shall include details of the proposed deck construction, including permeability, material, location of footing, substrate underneath, etc. The Knickerbocker Group prepared an additional plan sheet to address those comments. And lastly, plans must be stamped, signed, and dated by the New Hampshire CWS who delineated the wetland resource. As with the previous project, we will provide in the planning board plan set the requested stamp by the CWS. So that's about all I have in regards to addressing your comments, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you.
Just to follow up, because we talked about it, as far as the living shoreline, I think a lot of the things that you see in your applications on the shore deal with people having erosion at the edge of the shore, and a lot of questions about proper treatment, whether it's hard armoring or not. But as Keegan didn't mention, which I thought he was, this property abuts a significant stretch of well-vegetated marsh area that then goes off to that erodible shore. So it's sort of like already a living shoreline. There's no, it's a very stable area, and the other thing to consider is that this is not an area that sees direct hit storm wave action. So I thought Keegan was going to mention that, but I think it's worth mentioning it. That kind of is a living shoreline already. Thank you.
Questions from the commissioners?
Maybe just picking up on the living shoreline comment. I'm curious, maybe Kate, do you want to elaborate at all on like what kind of information you felt like was missing?
Sure, let me pull it up.
I mean, I get that it meets the criteria, but it could potentially be just a very simple little statement, you know, that gets added somewhere.
Yeah. So it says in our regs 10.17.26, where the proposed project involves a use, activity, or alteration in a tidal wetland or tidal wetland buffer, the application shall include a living shoreline strategy to preserve the existing natural shoreline and or encourage establishment of a living shoreline through restoration as applicable. Said living shoreline strategy shall be implemented unless the planning board determines it's not feasible. Yeah, I think, you know, their conversation about plantings kind of touches on that too. And just kind of one thought that I had about this kind of section and how it applies here is when we were on the site walk, I did notice that kind of low stone wall, that historic stone wall, and that, I'm no salt marsh expert, but that kind of just highlighted to me that maybe that might be an impediment to salt marsh migration in the future, and maybe there's opportunities here to also look at migration in terms of living shoreline strategies, and maybe breaking up that wall in pieces or into sections.
Do you mean this one or this?
There's a couple walls out
So
there.
right where the HOTL is, it's
The one where they're hugging it for the planting bed?
yeah, there's
Okay.
like a little, almost like,
It's super interesting too, because there's another wall out in the middle of the marsh.
Yeah, that
so
goes straight across.
yeah.
all these remnants
Right at
probably of,
mean
like,
high water.
farming and stuff
Yeah.
out there.
And maybe that's a testament, that wall, to the fact that the marsh can grow up and over that wall pretty easily. That was just,
Well, they
just a
were
thought.
probably like just farming out there in the middle of the marsh, between the two walls, at one point. Yeah, I was thinking about that too, Kate. I mean, I could just tell you like my kind of, just my kind of gut reaction of what would be like the best to do there. And again, there's probably different opinions, and I don't think I would recommend moving the wall. You know, I feel like it's pretty small, it's pretty porous, and like it's more disturbance, right, to kind of remove the wall. The thing that I noticed about the plan, I mean, it would be amazing to have the planting area kind of extend to the full 25 foot. no-cut zone. And you made a very sincere effort to get there, but, just to sort of note that that would be one thing that I think could help offset some of the other impacts related to the deck project and the fill and other things. And this is definitely a space where you're going to see kind of that yard getting increasingly wet in pretty short time, if you look at kind of the predictions. And just looking at your plants, I mean, it's amazing that you provided as much detail as you did, with like very specific, like how big are the plants and exactly what species, and not just what species, but like what subspecies or, which is amazing, but it meant that we could kind of look those up, and I would, they're not necessarily particularly salt tolerant, the ones that you picked for that particular area right along the edge there. And I actually think that what would work really well there are some salt tolerant like marsh grasses, to be honest. And it could be beautiful. I mean, I don't know, the native marsh grasses around here, they're actually not that tall. They're have these kind of very beautiful sort of shapes and forms that kind of develop. And they're low, so they don't block the view. They're very sturdy. And then it would ensure that planting area is going to stay resilient, as things get a little saltier and saltier over time. And there might be other, again, different opinions, and maybe other people who are here might have some additional expertise that they want to share related to that. But I would just kind of go species by species and really double check that they are salt tolerant, and not, like the choke cherry was one that I kind of flagged as oof, that's really kind of like a sandy, kind of dry soil kind of plant that doesn't do super well in the salt. But.
Okay, I mean, we can definitely
Yeah.
look into, planting salt-tolerant grasses. I think one way that we're a bit limited in terms of what types of plants that we plant here is, DES's shoreline zoning requirements and,
Yeah.
Meeting that minimum point score.
Right, because they want woody things.
Yeah, exactly. Which, I mean, I think
That's
there's
interesting.
something to say there, but I mean, we can of course look at, our plant list here and we can update that, and, I think, planting salt-tolerant grasses in addition to would be something that we can definitely look into, so.
Yeah, I know, I wrote down a couple other recommendations, if you did want a woody thing, I think it's, northern bayberry is often recommended in these situations, marsh elder.
Right, yep.
Yeah. Seaside goldenrod's another really pretty one.
Would you be able to point out where the fill and the grading is really happening on one of these plans?
Here, I've never used this before, so. Oh,
I
top
can
left.
zoom in a little bit too.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
I'm
it's,
just I'm like,
yep, so basically it's, and I think John can correct me if I'm wrong, we have these areas right here where most of that's happening. Basically, the areas directly adjacent to the deck are what needs to be brought up a little bit to meet the +2 flood hazard zone requirement in the city of Portsmouth. So it's just really these areas, we're not extending really that far out from the primary residence.
okay.
And yeah, like I mentioned previously, in the impact plan, we've included those areas now in the total impact amount.
Okay,
So, yep, that has been reflected.
okay, thank you.
I think there is a correction that needs to be made in that the flood hazard zone line it doesn't touch the stairway. So the raising of the grade is not, protect the structure, so the structure is not in the zone.
Okay. So then going out from that will just remain, you foresee it as remaining lawn that's not touched until it gets to those planting beds closer to the wetland boundary, is that
Right, yep.
correct? Okay.
Yeah, to provide just a little bit of yard area, because some of it will end up being lost with the introduction of the deck and the planting beds.
Yeah, yep.
So I don't know if I totally understand, but why do you have to continue raising the elevation all the way across, and rather than, if your goal is just to do it for the decking?
Oh, right. Yeah, because it's also for the grill area, and here I can point that out on the southern end of the deck. So it's also with the intention of bringing that also in accordance with 2+ feet. Yeah, so it's flat.
And then just to keep going, just because after that, it's going to be, I guess. It would look weird, I know.
Yeah.
But and I had another question that had to do with least impacting alternative. I know in the narrative you talked about it too, but I'm just wondering, so on the north side of the house, if you could go into a little more detail on that, because there's certain, I think you had to remove certain things and it would impact the large trees, you'd have to remove those, but
Yep.
I guess if you could talk about that in relation to where you were actually thinking of it going?
Sure. So, I mean, with the current deck right here, I mean, this made the most sense in terms of it's all located over a previously developed area. There's impervious areas currently existing that are being removed in this area, so it's kind of being repurposed. Another thought was maybe placing the deck up in this area. The only problem, well, there's several problems. There are ledge outcroppings here, so really shallow soils. We have a stone wall that stretches this entire location, and there's also a generator pad that's right here, and as well as the natural kind of vegetated buffer that currently exists in the northwestern part of this parcel is right here as well. So to really do any sort of meaningful construction here would require great effort, and it's still all within the shoreland zone, and it would likely require us to go a bit farther north into what's currently undisturbed forest. So it was kind of strategically chosen for that area. Not only does it happen to have, you know, a good view, of course, but also it's all in currently developed area. So overall, it would end up keeping the overall disturbed area within the shoreland zone a bit lower than if the deck were on the northern end.
So, and like a hybrid of going just around the corner, kind of, you know, keeping half the deck or whatever, and coming around the corner.
Instead of it all being on that one side.
Yeah.
So the client's existing kitchen is at the very kind of bottom edge of the deck where there's a door out to the deck. So to disconnect from that, the client expects to have, you know, outdoor meals out there, bring food out. So to, you know, basically disconnect from that point would make it challenging, you know, for the client to have to walk a lot further to the house or down outstairs. So it's more of a connectivity issue as well, to be right adjacent to the kitchen, to have, you know, food going in and out to the deck. So that was a request of theirs, to have that access more, you know, right there for them. So.
Okay, and then, so as follow-up, which is probably going to get a similar answer, is the stairs. You have two large stairways cascading off both sides. Is there any talk of being able to do one of the stairways instead, or changing that layout a little bit?
Potentially, yeah, we could chat with the client about that. So the thought with the two stairways was to kind of just give better access to the lawn, particularly with where the stair is currently. If it were to say go straight out, the number of risers required would kind of project further towards the resource. So the idea to kind of go down a couple steps to a landing, then split left and right, helped us better keep the stair tighter to the deck to, again, not protrude closer to the resource. And there's also, yeah, thank you, John, there's the grill area stair as well, to have access directly to the grill, coming out of the kitchen to go grill and then bring the food back up to the house or to the deck.
So that would be, because my other thought is to move the grill area up to the north area if you can't do the deck, but it's going to screw up the whole kitchen setup. Thank you.
I have a follow-on to Barb's. I just want to make sure that I understand, and I didn't get to go on this one, I wasn't here. But I'm reading in the no action alternative, it says The main reason that that's not acceptable is because the size of the patio is too small to accommodate guests. So I guess I'm wanting to better understand, or maybe I'm just pointing out, this is in a prime area. It's adding square footage. Generally, when something is in a area like that, we don't look at that and say, just because that's there, doing more in the area is acceptable because there's already a precedence. We look for ways to reduce, not extend. And I don't see any basis for that. Certainly, no action is an alternative because there's not a requirement to accommodate a certain number of guests. That's a desirable outcome of the applicant. So I guess I'm making the case as I continue to think about this that I don't find that viable. The no action alternative is certainly an alternative, and I would say it's more aligned with our objectives for these types of properties. This is a choice. This is a choice that has to do with recreation, and I'm not sure that I find that to be balanced with the greater impact. If this were, yes, it's moving things away. I do understand that. There's benefit to that. If it reduced in size or footprint or something else, but as it stands, I don't consider the no action alternative to be ruled out, and I couldn't support this as is. I'll just make that as a comment, not really a question.
I've got another question, unless you want to respond to that.
Respond to the comment.
Sure.
I mean, I understand I understand the comment, and I think though that the ordinance has sections in there about sort of permittable upgrades in these buffers, because we understand that over time properties may want to expand. And so I think if you look at it with the 25% lens that is applied to other places in the buffer, it's a reasonable ask. Right now, there's a lawn that's going to be replaced with some decking that will allow the water to go through. And as we talked about on the site walk, the submission includes the fact that the decking does have gaps, and below the decking is infiltrative surface. Thank you.
I don't know if you
That's tough.
Talia, your connection's not, you're having a bad connection.
Hey, Talia, sorry, your Zoom connection isn't that great, so you're not really coming across that well.
where ordinance does it how I know we've been going through the ordinance a lot.
Oh, perfect.
I don't know if that's better.
Oh, way
yeah.
better. Can you ask that
Yeah,
again?
can you start again?
You still there, Talia?
Oh.
All right, and she's gone. Oh, she's still there. Talia, can you hear us? Maybe we'll give her a second and come back.
Oh.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yep.
I think somehow I just disconnected from Wi-Fi. Sorry.
Do you want to repeat your question?
Yeah, I was just curious if anyone, I don't have the ordinance right in front of me and I can pull that up in a second, but do we know where in the ordinance it references where allowable upgrades would be? It just didn't ring a bell to me from my recent looking at it.
Yeah, it's not quite cited like that, but in section 10.17.24, it says, where feasible, the application shall include removal of impervious surfaces at least equal in area to the area of impervious surface impact. And it says the intent of this provision is that the project will not result in a net loss of pervious surfaces within a jurisdictional wetland buffer, If it is not feasible to remove impervious surfaces from the wetland buffer at least equal in area to the area of the new impervious surface impact, the application shall include a wetland buffer enhancement plan that describes how the wetland functions and values will be enhanced to offset the proposed impact.
What about the, I don't know if you're referring to the one where you can do additions to a
Yes,
house up to a
that's an
certain
exemption.
percentage of the square footage, something
Yeah.
allowable?
That's a good point. That 25% number is stated in the ordinance, but that's under the exemptions. So,
Yeah, okay.
you know, someone can add an addition on. It's a one-time kind of deal. That's 25% of the principal heated space. So an extra 25% as long as it's being added on further away from the wetland resource and it meets certain criteria. But the big one is that it's further from the resource.
Got it, okay, thank you.
So not super applicable here.
And so, can you hear me okay right now?
Yep.
I guess I was kind of thinking and maybe agreeing when Lynn had started to talk about if we were to approve this or work further on this, I think that it could be very helpful for sorry, I'm like having trouble being on Zoom and like not seeing you guys' faces, so I'm not speaking very well. But the idea of putting salt marsh tolerant plants up through the 25-foot buffer may have more of a, I don't know, maybe that goes in line with the way the ordinance is written because there isn't so much of a decrease in impervious. Yes, there's, you know, rock underneath the deck, but it's not quite the same as having just open space. So, yeah, that's my thought there.
Thanks, Talia. Kind of piggybacking on that a little bit. At the 25-foot buffer line, were you proposing that there be no mowing past that? Or,
I mean, besides for the planting bed, the idea was just to keep lawn maintenance as is.
okay,
Of course, we can talk with the client about, you know, your comment about the 25-foot buffer and salt-tolerant plants being introduced further into that. So that's something that we can definitely discuss and consider.
in terms of your planting beds, are you envisioning those being like pretty manicured and like mulched, or are they kind of more like natural, not a lot of upkeep, maintenance to them? You gotta go to the microphone, yeah.
Hi, Sig Knickerbocker, Landscape Architecture. The goal is to create a soil pocket that allows for the roots to thrive. The goal is for all of these plants to have a maintenance of regular watering and then nothing after the second year. The goal is for all of this to look like it's always been there. So in terms of plant material, we would take a look at the soil when we're starting to excavate for the pockets and make sure that there's enough nutrients in that soil to allow for it to thrive. Again, a lot of these are pretty tough plants, so I think a lot of this, again, is going towards the less is more in terms of the heavy-headedness of maintenance and additional mulch and compost. So.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? I have things to discuss, but I think would be better in comments. I don't have any actual questions.
I just wanted to clarify, the grill patio area, that a grill can't be on the deck?
Oh, fire code, apparently.
Oh, with the fire code. I was wondering about that. I mean, I know people do it all the time, but.
Okay. Would someone, yeah, come on up.
One additional note.
Yeah.
Since that grill is located there, we did want to make sure that there was additional buffer planting around that. It's just the obviously the top surface of that, but downslope towards the resource, there's that buffer for that as well. Just
Thank you.
Should be that
Yeah.
little area right there.
Okay. Seeing no further questions, would someone like to make a motion, even if it's just for, just open up discussion amongst the commissioners?
Yeah, I can make a motion to recommend the 5 Couriers Cove wetland conditional use permit so that we can have a discussion about any needed stipulations.
So recommend approval, just,
I mean, I think that's what we have to do, right?
okay.
Do whatever you want.
Okay.
Do we have a second to that, and then we can discuss amongst ourselves?
I'll second.
Okay. Do you want to start, Lynn? Because you made the motion. You don't have to. Sorry. Put you on the spot, but I can also start.
Yeah, I mean, I see the staff memo, right, is encouraging us to kind of postpone and try to get some more detail. They did provide quite a bit more detail here for us. Yeah, I mean, I feel like they've really gone over the top in terms of giving us a lot of detail. I mean, we approve projects that have a lot less detail, but that's, you know, also means that we can then really dig into the details. I'm gonna also just share that, you know, just kind of looking at like those kind of predicted kind of marsh migration area, you know, by 2015 or 2050 at a very modest level of sea level rise. You know, marsh is predicted to extend all the way up to that patio that's proposed to be removed, you know, just sort of as a point of reference on these diagrams. Yeah, so I guess that's on my mind, is like really protecting that wetland resource, and that would be one thing that I would try to ask for, is a much larger zone of kind of just restored marsh, really, or just, you know, pushing back that mow line, basically. You know, the deck is elevated, so somehow that makes me feel a little bit better about it compared to some other structures that might be put out there, like a full-on expansion of the home footprint, but that's just a little bit of a gut. That may or may not be based on actual impact of a deck versus an addition.
Yeah, I mean, for me, just looking at the criteria for approval, number 6 in particular, which is any area within the vegetative buffer strip will be returned to a natural state to the extent feasible. I think for me, that would be seeing that whole no-cut, or yeah, the 25-foot no-cut buffer, either being not mowed or, like we were kind of talking about, filling that in more with more salt-tolerant grass species would be awesome. In addition, I understand that this is kind of the location the deck needs to be based on, you know, where the kitchen is and the issues you cited over on the, I guess that's the northern side of the house with the bedrock and outcroppings, I guess.
Yep.
However, I do, a little bit to Brian's point of, you know, we need this size deck to accommodate guests. I think there's, you know, the original patio, which I'm not saying was great, was, I think it was like 700, well, that was, the combination of patio and walkways was like 780 square feet or something like that. And now, you know, this deck is like, I don't know, is it like 1,200 square feet or something like that with the stairs? I think there's, you know, somewhere in the middle that could be met that would not increase the impervious surface by, I think it was 500 feet in the 100-foot buffer. To get that number down, to get it to zero increase would be amazing. But, you know, I think there's room that the applicants could still work towards making this project better in this environmentally sensitive area from my viewpoint. And for those reasons, I wouldn't recommend approval. I don't necessarily think the project's like dead in the water, but I think this isn't the version that I would approve.
I was going to add, guys, that was really well said from both of you. And I think in addition to that, I think that there is some opportunity to actually move the stairway, maybe to the north side, maybe within the deck. And a lot of times you see that where it comes out underneath the deck. And then in addition to that, it would create a situation where that fill would not have to come so far out. And would just have to be under the deck rather than all the way in front of it and wrapping around. And just trying to be a little more creative on that end would be helpful. But otherwise, I think commissioners have made great suggestions.
Any other comments, discussion?
Well, I guess I'll just weigh in too, since I haven't yet. I think the criteria for approval and the section of the ordinance that that Kate referenced earlier about the sort of the balance of giving to the site with whatever we're proposing to impact, I think that's where this proposal needs to go. I think it all just sort of supports, I think, a gut feeling that I have that this is too large and that there's not enough being done to the site to kind of make me feel good that we should justify that much impact. So I feel like commissioners have already said the criteria that they don't feel like is being met. I share that, but I also kind of feel like that section of the ordinance, which speaks about balance, is kind of where we need to look if the deck truly can't get smaller or be changed or moved.
All right. Are we ready for a motion? I'm sorry, a vote?
Would it be appropriate to table? I mean,
Postpone it?
Yeah, I wonder if we should change
Yeah,
it.
and
back.
if you'd
Yeah.
prefer that, we
We
can,
would,
we can
yes.
change the motion to postpone?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yep,
okay.
Thank you.
If the
So who made the
motion
motion?
and the second is okay with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I can change the motion to a.
Sure.
Okay, I'll make a motion to postpone discussion about the 5 Couriers Cove wetland conditional use permit.
Second.
All in favor? Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, we forgot to vote at 6 o'clock. To extend to 6:30. That was my bad.
Let's do it now.
Oh, shoot.
We sort of did.
We talked about it.
I also
did talk
forgot,
about
you're
it.
right, we forgot to have Talia vote. Talia,
I
I'm
did
so
vote.
sorry. I forgot. Forgot to have you vote.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I put my
Talia.
hand up, but
Okay.
you know.
Did you put your hand up? Okay, then that, we
I
didn't do a
did
roll
put my
call.
hand
Do a
up,
roll call
and then
vote.
yeah.
It wouldn't have changed
So-
any.
We'll just
it
count
wouldn't
it
have
as
changed anything anyway.
5 to 0.
It was 5-4, yeah. 5-0.
Sorry, 6.
No, because Jess Jess recused herself.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6, 0. Okay. Man, I can't count. Okay, 6, 0.
Okay. Oh yeah, you still have so we have to do your state, is that why you're here?
No,
Oh,
I
you're here
think,
for the work session?
I think there's a work session, but I think it's 6:30, so if you
Yeah.
want to postpone that, I'm all for it.
But also
Let's,
the state
okay, so we
permit.
need to postpone the state permit
Yes.
for 5 Couriers Cove. So does someone want to make a motion for that?
Do you want to
Okay,
wait?
well, Jess can't because.
No, I can't do it,
No,
sorry.
Jess
Should we
is
wait
still
until Lynn
recused.
comes back?
I'll make a motion to postpone 5 Couriers Cove wetlands permit. Or
Second.
Okay, let's
Do a roll call.
let's do a roll call vote on this one here. Okay, Alice?
Yes.
You just won't have Lynn. Barbara?
Yeah.
Not Jess. Talia?
Yep.
Brian?
Yes.
Oliver?
Yes.
The chair votes yes. Okay, so that one's postponed. And then, yeah, we need to postpone the work session because we're at 6:30 here. So does someone want to make a motion to postpone
I will make a motion that we postpone the work session regarding 500 Jones Ave to the May meeting. Does that work?
Do you have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, roll call vote again. Alice?
Yes.
Barbara?
Yeah.
Jess?
Yes.
Talia?
Yep.
Brian?
Yes.
Oliver?
Yes.
The chair votes yes. Okay,
Thank you.
that's that.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. What do we have now? I mean, we still have master plan feedback. Oh, yeah, I told
don't think
you
I
don't know because I stole you. We have master plan feedback.
Lynn hasn't been voting because she's not here.
Okay.
So 1, 2,
1, 2,
3,
3,
4,
4,
5, 6, 7.
7-0. 7 in the sky. Okay. Oh my gosh. 7-0.
A lot of moving parts today.
Stephanie already left. Yeah.
No, she's gonna.
She's gonna
sorry.
hate me. Okay.
We voted without you just to postpone a bunch of stuff. We
Okay.
felt like you didn't need to be here for that.
I did. I voted by leaving.
Okay, so it's almost 6:30. We just, other business master plan feedback in Article 10. Obviously, Article 10, we can push. Master plan feedback, where are we on that?
Okay, yeah, Article 10 we can postpone. Master plan feedback, maybe Jess has something fun to say, but,
No,
You're on.
Something fun?
but I sent around something this morning / early afternoon. The master plan team sent out like a list of like skeleton draft recommendations. It's like a 40 page document. They would like feedback from all the city boards and commissions by Monday, which is quick turnaround. Luckily, we had a meeting so we could discuss this. But if you want to take a look at that, it's a Word document. If you want to like go in and type edits or type comments, if you have no comments, or if you want to just email me like a bullet point of I hated this section, like remove it, or you're missing a section about this, or there's no real theme here about conservation. I haven't looked at it, so I don't know. But I'm just hoping if you have any feedback at all, just email me individually before Monday, and I'll send it their way. And if Jess has any other methods, please let us know.
Yes,
Can you
I
do
have not had any addition. We haven't met since this came out, and so I don't have much information to add beyond what Kate just shared.
Do you like what they've done so far?
It's mixed. I think I have not thoroughly looked at it either. I think one of my concerns in general about the process is that I don't feel like they have a good representation of our community. I know we're kind of past some of the public engagement stuff, but they've had about 2% of Portsmouth residents engage, and most of them were retirees. So I would really love for them to get into the schools and to some of the housing authority, or I was even thinking like, why aren't they going to the schools and talking to the teachers or the firefighters or like city staff who support our community? So that is one of, regardless of the draft at this point, one of my things right now is how do we get more people engaged around this as they're building this draft?
So, and I just had a question about the format and how it was sent out and how to comment on it. It's not a document that's actually shared. I don't have it up, but it's not a document that's actually shared.
Right, so if you have like redlined edits that you want to go in and type or comment, I can just forward that and they're going to look through every single, or I can always summarize them in a email too. But if you're more, I just offered using the document to type in because it's so easy. And I'm happy to kind of either share all the edited documents with the consultant or kind of transcribe stuff into an email, if whatever's easier for
But
you.
you'd like it to go to you first, then it's all kind of going out as saying
Right.
this is all from the Conservation
Like,
Commission.
this
Okay.
is, yeah, I'll just do one big email of,
Okay.
this is how many commissioners responded, these are their responses. Yeah.
Okay,
Um,
all right.
Yeah, and I can CC, we'll blind copy the commission on my email, so if that's interesting to see everybody's kind of input. Actually, I take that back, I'm sorry, that would be in violation of,
Quorum.
sorry, because it's sharing business that we haven't all seen.
That's all right, it was a good try.
Sorry. Wow, I got really excited. Okay, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there anything else, Kate or Jessica, like as background? Like in terms of like any big changes they're making this cycle? You know, it's just, sometimes it's like hard to evaluate without some context.
Yeah, so I will say generally speaking, the consultants have their presentation to us is that they are trying to kind of fill in some of the gaps of a lot of efforts that the city has already done, meaning like the bike and pedestrian plan that's in work and the climate action plan and some of the other plans. And so rules and guidelines we have around the historic districts. So they are looking at pockets of the city that they see as future and potential development sites and how those are developed and structured and kind of linked into the greater city. So that's their perspective. That's why you'll see when you look at the maps, they have certain sections of the city highlighted, is that's really where their focus and their thought is as these parts of Portsmouth get developed, what is going to be the thought process and strategy around that development and integration into the broader city.
That's cool. So like, I'm just like staring at the maps.
So some of them are along Route 1, like down where some of that new development is happening and like out Water Country Way in that area, and then some is over like off of Woodbury and back in there and some of those areas.
Okay, that's super helpful. Right, it's hard to decipher the language sometimes. Like they label those as established patterns, whatever that, enhance. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yep.
And when you say you wish that there was more interaction with the public, or is there going to be an opportunity?
There is on April 22nd. That is the next open house. I will have Kate send out, because I can't remember. I believe it's at the library, but I'm not sure time at the moment. But that'll be the first opportunity for the public to comment on the draft and interact and engage around that.
Yeah, there's just so many.
I can't remember. That's the thing. I'm not sure where it is.
We'll find out and send it.
Yeah. Sorry. I have lots of pieces on my brain at the moment, so I can't recall where that one is.
Jess, it's been really, really helpful for you to be on this and have the crossover. You know, just knowing you're there, like paying attention, and it's like really comforting.
I appreciate that. I'm glad that I can serve this commission and the city as a whole. And while we're on the record, I'm going to plug the Sustainability Fair this Friday, 4:30 to 7. We have a coast bus coming. We have a food truck coming. We have creatures from the Seacoast Science Center and the Wildlife Center in York. We'll have free bike and helmet safety checks, courtesy of Sabre. We hopefully will have saplings from Max, our city arborist, if he can get them. And I think we have like 30 organizations that are attending, so... Yeah, so if you're around, please come.
Cool. And we have a table.
Say that
The commission has a table.
And the commission will be there
next to
tabling.
The planning department.
Yes.
Good. And you're going right, Alice?
Not for the whole time.
Not
but
for
I'll
the
talk
part
to
of
you
the
about
time.
that later.
Okay.
And I'll go a little bit. I just can't stand for long. So.
Yeah, it'll be a good team. We'll manage it.
All right. Meeting adjourned.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you. Good.